All right, here is a technical video about Tesla. Oh yes, I'm still on vacation. This is a nice hotel. So I figured, okay, let's record a video. Like this is a video that has been requested. I talked about it before, but I forgot to make it. I'm almost busy testing other cars. So this video is going to be about the technical details about those races I had. So it's like the race I had from Oslo to Trondheim and back again. I've been doing 3 rounds of races so far. So the first round was Ioniq versus Ampera-e. Now, maybe I should talk a little bit about, okay, those cars. The idea was that, okay, Ampera-e had a fairly big battery pack, 60 kilowatt hour pack, whereas Ioniq only had 28. Now, the 28 is actually available energy. So, but basically, like Ampera-e usually will have about twice as big capacity as Ioniq. But the idea was that Ampera-e consume more energy than Ioniq. So of course in the beginning Ampera-e would have a lead, but then slowly Ioniq would catch up, and then of course in the end it should be very very close, which it was. Yeah. So to just summarize that trip, I drove the Ioniq, and then my friend Powell drove the Ampera-e, and then it was like, I mean, the Ampera-e was leading all the way, right, in the beginning. Also halfway to Trondheim, Ampera-e was leading, and then me in the Ioniq slowly caught up. Towards the end, it was like neck on neck, but then Ampera-e for some reason shut down with what, 25 kilometers, like some 15 miles left. I'm not sure if it was a bug or anything, but yeah, so you could say, okay, Ioniq would have won that one. But I'm going to show you later. It seems like, it wasn't like Powell, who drove the Ampera-e, didn't drive optimally, but I'll come back to that. And then the next race was Model X versus Kona. It's like a little bit exotic because Model X cost way more than Kona. So this time I let Powell drive the Model X, the nice and expensive car, which is my Model X Optimus Prime, a P90D Ludicrous, and then I drove Kona. And then on that race, that race was like, the idea was that, all right, Kona had a smaller battery, but Kona is also much smaller car and more efficient. It turns out my Model X is a performance model with over 700 horsepower, so it's a thirsty car, but it could charge fast on supercharger, faster than Kona. Kona was like the underdog here because Kona could only charge on the 50 kilowatt fast chargers, whereas the Model X had supercharger support. And by the way, sorry about the background noise. Wife is taking a shower right now, so I hope it doesn't catch too much in the microphone here. But okay, so the idea there was that in this case, Kona actually had an advantage in the beginning because it started with a full battery, and then Kona would drive further before it needed a charge. Model X was slightly different. My car also was limited, software limited, because it's done too much supercharging, so it didn't have the full speed at the supercharger anymore. And then there, Kona kind of had the lead in the beginning, but then the Model X could kind of like catch up because it charged faster. And then towards the end, I also won though, but it was very close. I mean, he came only 30. Okay, so I drove Kona right now. So Powell, who drove the Model X, came only 30 seconds after me. But when we look at the state of charge towards the end, he had more range, so he could have left earlier and won the race. Yeah, so I would even call it a tie between those two cars. And then the last race was between an I-Pace, Jaguar I-Pace, and a Kia Soul. So I remember when we discussed like which car we should try to match with the I-Pace. Model X would win big time. I'm going to show you later why, because Model X has supercharger support, and then Ioniq. Some people also suggested, what about I-Pace versus Ioniq? No, Ioniq would also win big time because Ioniq is so efficient. So that's why I chose Kia Soul EV, and this time again. So I've been winning 2 rounds, right? So I let Powell drive the nice car this time, I-Pace, and I've been making a lot of videos with I-Pace. So I figured, yeah, let Powell drive it. So I drove the underdog here, Kia Soul. So we see already now we see a trend where Powell gets to drive the thirsty car, and I get to drive the most efficient car. You know, Ioniq is more efficient, Kona more efficient, and Soul is also more efficient. So the whole idea with I-Pace versus Soul is that I-Pace was a thirsty car. It had a freaking 90 kilowatt hour battery pack. At least I measured to be about 82 kilowatt hours available. Sorry for the background noise. But so 82 kilowatt hour versus Soul, which had only 30 kilowatt hour. It was like the underdog here, but you see, both cars were limited to the 50 kilowatt fast charger, but Soul consumed way less energy, especially when it was driving slow. And when it was driving fast, that was kind of the funny thing why I chose Soul, because Soul also had the aerodynamics like a brick, just like I-Pace. So at high speed, Soul was very thirsty, but I-Pace was actually even more thirstier. Yeah, so it was a fun race, and that race we were even. Yeah, like we kind of like, it was funny because on that race, like I passed him, and then he passed me, and then I passed him, and he passed me, and towards the end we had to do one last stop, and just happened to be at the same place, Nebenes. And it was funny because I calculated how much state of charge I needed, and then he arrived and he calculated how much he needed, and we reached that same break at that point at the same time. So I was like, all right, let's just go back together. So that was so even. So I should also tell you, okay, the route here, it's almost 1,000 kilometers, almost 600 miles. It's 971 kilometers, well, 603 miles actually. And 1/5 of the route is motorway with, we start with 80 and then goes to 100 kilometers per hour and then 110 kilometers per hour limit. And then we cruise, we set the rule that we cruise 10% over the speed limit, not 10 kilometers per hour. Many people, they mistake that it's 10 kilometers per hour over. It's 10%, which is within the slack where the police don't catch us. They don't care if we go 10% over. Actually, many people, you will see in the race, you know, that many people overtake us because they drive faster than us. But at least we drive at the realistic speed, so we're not like driving a hat or anything. But okay, so 1/5 of the way is a motorway, and then the rest, the 4/5 of the way, is this Norwegian highway with only 80 kilometers per hour limit, which is about 50 miles per hour. Most places, but we also have like small towns or whatever with lower speed limit. So the thing is that at least when we do these battles, right, both cars should be able to drive at the same speed here. You know, it's not like one car is limited by a trailer or whatever. So we only have to look at, I mean, the driving time should be the same for both cars, and then we only have to look at charging time. So let me just dig into the results, right? Actually, okay, one small thing I almost forgot. We should also look at one thing, which is the pricing. It's also a bit interesting here because no, we use Fortum fast on the stretch here. We race. Fortum has really good coverage of fast chargers on the route, and normal price for Fortum is 250 NOK per kilowatt hours. That's like almost 30 cents, euro cents, or dollars roughly per. No, sorry, I meant 250 NOK per minute. Yeah, it's by minute, yeah, which is fair, I think. So normal price is 250, but then in a section in Østerdalen from Rena, including Kvikne, the price is 4 NOK per kilowatt hour. So that's 40% higher than the regular price. I keep saying per kilowatt hours. It's of course 4 NOK per minute. Yeah, so Fortum, they explain that they have to raise the price on this stretch because not many people charge there. It's like no man's land, right? And the problem is that they have to pay for the energy, kilowatt hours, right? Energy is kilowatt hours, but they also have to pay for peak power, kilowatt. Because when you fast charge, you pay for the energy you use over a charging session, how many kilowatt hours, but they also have to pay for that peak power, which is probably like 50 kilowatt or whatever higher. And the problem is that even if one car comes there in one day and charged it, and they get a spike, a power spike, then they have to pay lots of money. So that's why they raised the price. I'm not sure if that actually helps because, not many people charge there. So yeah, they still probably lose a lot of money, but I think it's more like a political protest they have, to change some of the rules. But okay, anyway, so we'll also come back to that, why it matters. So if we look here at the first table here, we have the charging times. Remember that in theory, both cars should drive at the same speed. So we look at the charging time here, the battle between Ampera-e and Ioniq. And you see the charging stops. So Ampera-e stopped in Alvdal, Berkåk, and then on the way return, also Berkåk again, and Koppang, Løten. And you see the number of minutes and also price in NOK. NOK is Norwegian kroner for people who don't know what it is. And then we also included the price in euros and US dollars. And then you see for Ioniq, very similar, you see that we spend almost the same time charging, but that doesn't tell you all the truth, because this is okay charging time, but how much energy we get might be different. I actually think that Ioniq, well, I'm not sure, but Ioniq, let me think here. So Ampera-e started with more energy. The Ampera-e had about 60 kilowatt hours in the beginning, whereas Ioniq had only 30 something, 28, So Ampera-e had about a 30 kilowatt hour lead. And then during the battle, that lead was eaten up slowly because Ioniq was more efficient. But okay, so I'm not going to overanalyze this, but you see that it was a very even run, and for some reason Ioniq charged longer, but it still won. So it's a little bit of a puzzle to me why Ioniq won, despite charging longer. Maybe, okay, I know that in this round, the first round, Pavel was fiddling a bit at some charging station, because the charging port is like in a clumsy place. So if you don't park close enough, then the charging cable is not long enough. So he had to like reposition a couple of times. So that was a little bit clumsy. So he lost some time there. Yeah. And then there could have been some traffic that caused him to lose. But overall, it was a very even fight, right? And then the next one here was between Kona and Model X. And in that battle, well, I like, okay, these numbers, I found them in the Fortum app. So I didn't have any data for Model X, but what I remember was that Model X had to stop 5 times to supercharge, whereas Kona only charged 2 times. And you see that every time Kona stopped to charge, it had to charge very long, 57 minutes for the first stop and then 53 for the next stop, because it's just the nature of how it works that at supercharger for the Model X, you want to ride on the so-called 90 kilowatt wave. It's like a little bit too complicated for me to explain now, but basically my Model X has been restricted in the speed because it's been supercharging too much. So ideally you want to arrive with about 50 to 100 kilometers of range. That's like, okay, let me say in percentage instead. You want to arrive with 15-20% state of charge roughly. And then you want to charge to about 60-65%. So you have that small frame where you should supercharge. That meant that for optimal charging speed, you want to charge very often with Tesla, but it charged very fast. So you only charge for like 15, 20, 25 minutes, then off you go again. Whereas in Kona, you want to charge long, because you arrive and then you want to charge to 73%. You get the maximum speed up to 73%. And another thing with Kona is, and most other EVs, which is not Tesla, is that those 50 kilowatt fast chargers are limited by the amount of number of amps they can deliver. right? So if you arrive with a Kona or Ioniq or Leaf or whatever, you will not get 50 kilowatt. Actually, you don't get 50 kilowatt regardless, because of the voltage of the pack. But you will usually get around 40, 42 kilowatt when you have a low state of charge, and then you gradually get more and more speed towards about 48 kilowatt is usually the peak. And then and with many cars like Leaf or whatever with a smaller pack, maybe already at 60, 65%, it starts tapering off towards the end. Whereas with Kona, you get full speed all the way to 73%, and then you get a big drop. So I try to charge to 73% every time and then unplug. So that's why it's a very long charging session. And it's a bad idea if I charge Kona to, let's say, 40% only and unplug, because I'm already getting better and better speed. And then if I unplug and go to the next one, then the voltage drops, and then I get worse speed. So yeah, there you have it, why Kona needs to charge so long. But you see that I also marked the number with red here, which is that for the first battle with Ampera-e and Ioniq, there was this old price, and then Fortum raised the price, by 40% at certain places, and Hanestad is within that stretch. And I also included the price with Kona if you would charge, if the price didn't go up. So this is also interesting, that if you compare Ampera-e Ioniq, see they needed to charge for 300 and something, and also it makes sense that Ampera-e, you see, you need to pay less for fast charging, because you start usually by charging very cheap at home, and then you only need to top up this much for your long trip. And actually, this is also a little bit like unusual, because normally you would drive from Oslo to Trondheim maybe and stay there for a couple of days or whatever, and slow charge, and then you go back again. So the difference actually between Ampera-e and Ioniq is bigger. Like the bigger battery you have, the more energy you can start with, it's better, because then you need to fast charge less on your way to your destination, right? And you see here that Kona, if we assume old price, then Kona is of course much cheaper than Ampera-e and Ioniq for this trip. And this is even a long trip, so normally it would be like you can almost cut it to half, say that, okay, for Kona you only have to top up for 100, 150 NOK during the trip. Actually, you know what? Kona, you can almost drive there without fast charging. So maybe even like 50 NOK top up, and then you reach there. All right, so that was Kona versus Model X, the second round. And then the third round is like, you see some crazy numbers here, all right? I-Pace versus Soul. This is where it gets interesting, because I-Pace is so thirsty. So I don't know what happened. Like, we had to charge 770 NOK. I was like, what? And then I also calculated numbers for Soul, and that was the same, like 700. I'm not sure why it was so high. I'm trying to figure, maybe you guys can figure out why. But okay, so we still have those red numbers. But even if we kind of calculate what the price would have been if Fortum didn't raise the price, it would still be expensive. It would still be over 700, 600 NOK, which is almost twice as high as Ampera-e versus Ioniq. Now, one explanation is that the weather during the I-Pace versus Soul race was worse. We had rain and some wind and some schmutz or whatever, whereas in the Ampera-e Ioniq race, there was like dry road, nice high temperature, nice summer temperature. So that counts, negative towards I-Pace Soul. And also I-Pace Soul, they were somewhat thirsty compared to like Ioniq and Ampera-e. So that could explain why. But you also see that Soul had to charge a lot. So remember, I was the one driving Soul, and I wanted to do it like this because I know the route better than Powell. So he would get like the easy match here driving I-Pace. And for him, okay, let's start with him first. You see that every time he stopped, he had to charge very long, like over an hour, or like 1 hour and 20 minutes, in Alvdal. That was also the nature of the I-Pace, because I-Pace had a big battery pack, And what is cool with I-Pace is that it has higher pack voltage. They designed the car, I mean, they designed the battery pack to have more cells in series to get higher voltage. And remember what I told you in the beginning, that those 50 kilowatt fast chargers, they have a limit of how many amps you can output, unlike Tesla supercharger. With a supercharger, well, you can output, like, I've seen over 300 amp burst in the beginning, you know? Whereas here you are limited to only about 120 amp, and then the voltage of the pack will dictate how much power you get overall. But with Soul and Kona, actually all the other cars here we have mentioned here, usually at low state of charge you will have only 350 volt or whatever, but I-Pace has almost 50 volt higher. So it means that when you arrive with the I-Pace with low state of charge, you already get 48, 49 kilowatt, which is insane. And then it stays there almost flat, you know, you get almost like a flat rate up until about 82%. That's when it starts tapering off. And even when it starts tapering, it's still good. Like you still get, let's say, 45 kilowatt, you know, up until like 85%. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that's the thing with I-Pace, that he had to charge for a very long time, you know, and also he shouldn't charge too often, because every time you stop, you have to, like, you know, park, like plug it in, take out your RFID, whatever, and then some places might not be right by the highway. But we chose locations that were right by the highway, so we didn't have to take any detour, you know, unlike me. I will come back to that. So that was the nature of the I-Pace, you know, very long charging stops. And okay, I-Pace supports 100 kilowatt, but in this case we didn't have them, so it was like a disadvantage for I-Pace. But you know, Soul also supports 100 kilowatt. That was also one of the reasons why I chose Soul, because you can't say it was unfair for the I-Pace, because if we had 100 kilowatt fast charger on the route, Soul will also benefit from it, and will also be an equal race, hopefully. So yeah, I'm not sure what else I should say about the I-Pace. It was very thirsty, so it needed lots of charging. And here, by the way, here you can see that this is the reason why I didn't want to race an Ioniq versus I-Pace, because Ioniq, or even some people suggested Kona and Ioniq would beat I-Pace by far. You see, like, Kona would arrive almost 2 hours before I-Pace, and Ioniq would arrive like at least an hour before I-Pace. So I did calculate, like, very detailed. I will also come back to that, how I calculated this. But let's talk about the Soul then. Yeah, lots of details in this video. You guys are probably eating popcorn now and just listen. So with the Soul, it was very different, because I had to charge often, and I had to try to pick the locations that were right by the highway. So Løten was right by the highway, my first stop. Koppang was also right by the highway, you know, only like maybe like less than 30 seconds to turn off the highway and then plug it in or whatever. Same with Alvdal, Bergkok. Most of these were right spot on, except for Rena, which is like, let's say, about 2-3 minutes total detour to go there. And those extra minutes actually counts. And I had to charge often, because Seoul, like, okay, for the first leg you can maybe go, let's say, 150, almost 200 kilometers, but not on the first stretch, which has motorway. But then when you top up, you don't charge to, you know, whatever high state of charge. So usually for Seoul, I figured out that Seoul seems to charge fast up to about 80%. Actually, some people say that there is a breakpoint at 77%, and then another breakpoint at 82% or whatever. So most of the time I charge to 82%, because I try to minimize the charging stop. If I charge to 77, I might have to, you know, charge me even more often than this. So that was my charging strategy: charge often and also drive fast. This also applies to all the other cars we have tested in these races, that the fast charging speed is much greater than, you know, the like, it doesn't pay off to drive slowly, you know? Ideally, I haven't calculated for all these cars, but I guess, based on what I know from Tesla Model S and X, that you have to drive, let's say, about 130 to 150 kilometers per hour on Kona or Ioniq or whatever for the optimal speed, you know, versus charging speed versus driving speed. But obviously you're not allowed to drive that fast. So when we drive at 88 kilometers per hour in the 80 zone, that is as fast as we should drive. If you drive slower, you will lose. You will arrive slower. And here you see that Seoul, actually, I charge more longer than I-Pace for some reason. So in theory, I should lose, but I'm not sure why I won, because I won. Well, I didn't win. Okay, it was a tie, but I remember that Powell was unlucky at this road construction site. There was like red light, and he got stuck there many times. And there was like 3 red lights after each other. So I think when I passed there, I was luckier. So he lost about 5 minutes there. And then he was also a little bit clumsy with the charge port with I-Pace, because, you know, again, I-Pace and Ampera-e, they have the charge port on the left side of the front of what, not on the very front, but on the left side of the car. So it's like, it's clumsy. And then, of course, obviously, I-Pace is an expensive car, so you don't want to bump into something. So yeah, he misplaced the car a couple of times, had to move. So maybe he lost some time there. I'm not sure where, like, how the heck I could match him with the charging here, but for some reason we came even. So, you know, over a long time, this was like, it took like 16, 18 hours, and in the end, you know, it was neck and neck. So I managed to match the two cars here very equally. Yeah, all right, I think enough talk about this. Now let's talk about how I calculate how long it takes for both cars. So let me see. Well, actually, I have to stop the video because it's too long. Right, we are back. This is the problem with the Canon camera, is that it can only record up to half an hour at a time. But all right, let's continue. So how do I calculate and how do I match 2 cars against each other? Well, all right, so the first thing I need to know is what is the energy consumption at the high-speed section, right? With 100, so I need to know roughly the consumption at 110 kilometers per hour. And then I need to know the consumption at 85 kilometers per hour. So many times, for many cars, I've done these speed tests where I drive at 120 kilometers per hour and 90 kilometers per hour. So I just have to like subtract a little bit from that consumption to estimate how much these cars should consume, right? And then the next thing I need to know is available energy in both cars. And I also need to know the average charging speed when you fast charge this whatever car at the supercharger or the fast charger, whatever. And as I mentioned, you know, so 20% of the stretch was with high speed, well, high-ish speed. Yeah, you Germans go, no, it's not high speed. Okay. And then the last 80% is the slower speed, right? And then the distance was 971 kilometers, but to simplify it, I rounded up to 1,000 kilometers. That makes things much easier to calculate. And you know, as long as we compare 2 cars which can drive as fast as each other, then we don't have to care about the driving time. We only have to look at charging speed, like charging time. And if you take the example with Kona versus Model X, I assume that Kona will consume 185 and 125 watt per kilometer. And then we take the 0.2 times 185 plus the 0.8 times 125. That is 137 kilowatt hours needed. And then Kona has 64 kilowatt hours available energy. We have to assume a small buffer at the end there. So we will start with 100% and then we will drive it down to, like, let's say 5-6%. So that means we have 60 kilowatt hours we can use. So we take 137 minus 60 and we get 77 kilowatt hours that we need to charge during the trip. And then we assume that I can average 45 kilowatt during these charging sessions. So 77 divided by 45, and then you get 1 hour and 43 minutes charging time. And then we do the same with the Model X, but Model X is thirstier. So 250 and 210 watt hour per kilometer. And then we do the same calculation there, and you see we need 218 kilowatt hours. That's almost twice as much. But the Model X has more energy. So there we assume, yeah, let's say, okay, we assume like almost 80 kilowatt hours we have available. And then we say, okay, we can spend at least 70 kilowatt hours of that. So we need to add 148 kilowatt hours during the charge. But Model X can supercharge like twice as fast as Kona. So we have the 148 divided by 90, so that is 1 hour and 39 minutes. And you see that these are very close, and in theory, Model X should win. But like I mentioned before, Model X needs to charge more often. So that's why it became such a close match in the end. But all right, so the last thing I will talk about is, or second to last thing is that why do I take this route? Some people suggested, why don't you go to like Stockholm or race to Copenhagen or Bergen or something, you know, like fun stuff. Well, the problem with going other places is that, okay, let me explain why I chose this route, and then you will understand why I didn't choose the other routes, right? Because I like this route because it has a nice mix of motorway and like highways, right? Norwegian highways. And also Østerdalen is nice because we have less traffic there, less cars. And also nice thing about Østerdalen is that there are many fast chargers there. So you have the possibility to skip charges, and many of these fast chargers are right by the highway. And a good thing is that the chargers in that certain stretch, you know, is highly priced, like high price. So it means that they're less likely that people will charge there, because that's also one thing I don't want to run into, that that one guy is lucky and gets a charging session, whereas another guy has to like sit and wait. So fortunately for all the races we had now, we didn't run into that situation where, you know, one person will get stuck, because then it's a bit unfair, because we are comparing the cars after all. And also another very important thing is that in Østerdalen there are like long straight stretches where you are allowed to overtake, and also good possibilities to overtake, because you want to get past the trucks and the Sunday drivers. So overall, when we have these matches, both me and Pavel, we hammer a lot. Yeah, hammering means that we overtake. Yeah, it's just just the way of saying it. I kind of like start saying it, hammer time. And also another nice touch is that towards the end of the race, we will also have motorway and lots of fast chargers on that last stretch. So it's also interesting that towards the end it gets really exciting, because we have to drive fast, but we also have to not run out of juice. So yeah, it's a nice fun route. And the other routes, like going to Bergen or whatever, can be busy. We might be stuck behind trucks, not able to overtake, which is unfair for one car or another. It's more like luck based, whereas in this route it's more like car, depends more on the car, and I guess somewhat on the skill of the driver. And then, okay, last thing I will talk about is what about other races? So I thought about future races. All right, let's start with one race, which is the Leaf versus, okay, the 40 kilowatt hour Leaf versus e-Golf, the 35.8 kilowatt hour Leaf. Yeah. The fun thing about those two cars is that Leaf has slightly bigger battery pack, whereas e-Golf should be slightly more efficient. And the funny part is that both these cars lack active cooling, and eventually both cars will rapid gate, which is that they will reduce the fast charging speed. Yeah. And then another disadvantage with the Golf is that it has lower pack voltage than Leaf and most other EVs. So like I mentioned, you know, if you have low state of charge on Leaf or other cars, you will usually have 350 volt, and then towards the high end you get like 400 volts. So it goes from around 350 to 400 volt, whereas Golf, for some reason, it has lower voltage. So it starts like 300 volts and then goes up to 350. And that means that when the Golf charges at the fast charger, it will not get 42 to 48 kilowatt. It will get like 35 to 42 only. So the Golf is like the underdog here when it comes to charging speed, but the Golf seems to not overheat that fast as Leaf, again, probably because it has lower charging power, you know. So that could be a fun match. When I suggested it in the Leaf group, they were like, we are tired of hearing about this rapid gate. Can you do something else? Okay. And then another fun race would be, again, the Leaf 40 kilowatt hour versus ENV 200 40 kilowatt hours. So that one is also could be a fun and challenging battle, because the Leaf rapid gates, like I mentioned, yeah, no need to explain more about that. The ENV 200 also rapid gates. Now the ENV 200 has active cooling. It's like it's air cool, just the fan cooling down, but it helps a ton. But the problem with the ENV 200 is the way they designed it, because the active cooling is only active when you are plugged in and and the car is on. So if you're driving, active cooling is off. If you are fast charging and the car is off, then the active cooling is also off and the temperature skyrockets. So I found out about this. So, but the good thing is that as long as you do the right things, you know, like turn on the car while you're fast charging, then the temperature on the ENV 200 battery doesn't go much past 41 degrees Celsius. Whereas Leaf battery, once it rapid gates, it goes sky high to 50 kilowatt. So, but of course, the disadvantage with the ENV 200 is that it has the aerodynamics like a brick. So, yeah, it could be a fun race. Yeah. And then the next suggestion I have is I-Pace versus e-tron. So, yeah, e-tron is not out yet, but it would be fun to try to match these two titans against each other. We don't know yet how thirsty e-tron will be, how fast it will charge. I-Pace will probably have an advantage that it charges faster, but I don't know the pack voltage on the e-tron. Maybe the e-tron has lower voltage, which means it charges slower, but maybe the e-tron is more efficient than I-Pace. So we'll see. And then the fourth suggestion is I-Pace versus Model X using CHAdeMO. So it's a bit weird because, you know, normally you want to use supercharger on that stretch. It has supercharger, so it's like a weird scenario where why the heck would a Tesla use CHAdeMO where it could use supercharger? So yeah, I come across that idea, but I kind of scratch it every time. But it would be interesting to try that battle. Yeah. And then the last idea is to race Kona versus Model X again, a rematch, but this time in winter, because in theory Kona should be more efficient than the Model X, because the Model X has this PTC heater. The only way to heat up the cabin is to use this resistive heater, which is less efficient, whereas Kona has heat pump. So in winter, Kona might really shine when it comes to efficiency versus Tesla. Yeah, so it could be fun, but I mean, if we try a rematch, then Model X might lose big time, because last time Model X lost. So yeah, I don't know, it could be fun. So anyway, what do you guys think about these ideas? Or do you have any other ideas? But I mean, it should be a close match, like, you know, like when I listed these cars, okay, I did some rough calculations and they should be a close match, because it's almost pointless to race, to put two cars up against each other where one car arrives 1 hour before, and that's we want the really even matches where like neck on neck towards the end. That's when you get the neck snapping action going on. Yeah. But all right, it was a very long video with lots of details about the race. So I don't know, you guys requested a detailed video, so here it is. Lots of info. It was almost as long as watching the races itself, but it's a different content. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you for watching, and talk to you later.